Module 2, Designing a Qualitative Field Research. For intended learning outcomes, first, recognize the basic components of research design. Second, design field research processes. Third, identify research goals. And fourth, develop research questions. And last is create your conceptual framework. Before we get into the components of research design, let us have some review of what qualitative research is. First, qualitative research is a practical approach. It is done at the ground using a wide range of procedures. What we mean by this is that we really look into the experience of the people, we immerse into the life of the people, and at the same time we are bringing in pragmatic, practical understanding and solutions to the situations, the realities, and the ground. And the second one is, very often we think about qualitative research as inductive. It's not only about inductive. When you look at the real experience of doing qualitative research, it is a combination of doing inductive and deductive, using inductive and deductive approaches. But again, very often the common denominator experience rather in doing qualitative research is about very often you would use inductive approaches. And the last is qualitative research is adaptive. What do we mean by adaptive? It is very flexible in many ways. Unlike with quantitative, it's like when you start doing, when you plan, when you design a quantitative, whatever you design from the start, you should be following that straightforwardly until the end. Unlike with the qualitative, your design can be changing from the middle, and even towards the end, a lot of things might be changing. So it is also customizable. So you can design and redesign and then redesign again your approaches in making sense of the data or even gathering the data. So we create a huge room for adjustment in qualitative research. It's quite challenging because of its nature, but it makes things more exciting. Okay. The next one is qualitative research is a craft. What do I mean by craft? It is more than having the skills of research. You bring in your passion, you bring in your values. Remember kapag when you really like doing what you want to do, parang hindi mo napapansin ang oras na ibibigay mo yung buong sarili mo sa ginagawa mo. And at the same time, coming up with the quality of what you're doing. That's what you call craft. Yung bang ramdam na ramdam mo yung ginagawa mo. At the same time, nagde-develop ka ng napakagandang parang at the tip of your finger, alam na mo lang ginagawa, but at the same time, nagke-create ka ng napakagandang bagay. Okay? And what are the component of craftsmanship in terms of doing qualitative research? First one is the originality. Pag gagawa ka ng research, sisiguraduhin mo na kakaiba yung ginagawa mo. So, for example, yung pintakasi. Kahit i-research mo yan, mahihirapan kang humanap ng literature related doon sa ginawa kong research. Meron din akong ginawang research on wellness intelligence. The title of this research is Wellness Intelligence. Miskis i-google mo pa yan, hindi mo makikita yung topic na yan. So kung gagawa ka ng research, hindi lang siya dahil gusto mong kakaiba ka. Pero doon sa paghanap mo ng uniqueness, sa pagtingin mo sa bagay-bagay sa paligid mo, alam mo na hindi lang mag-i-stand out yung iniisip mo, pero magkakaroon ito ng lugar sa society in terms of its contribution. Okay? So when you're thinking about research, siguraduhin mo lang na merong uniqueness, originality yung ginagawa mo. Hindi ka lang basta parang nagdo-duplicate dahil pinaniniwalaan mo tong teorya nito, so doon ka na lang. Okay? So maganda rin bilang isang researcher or bilang isang psychologist, alam mo meron kang, nagkikreate ka ng sarili mong teritoryo. Di ba? Para kang, just for example, pwede mo i-consider ang sarili mo na isa sa mga theory kagaya ni Freud, kagaya ni Skinner, sino pa ba? Ni Jean Piaget. So you create your own space. You create your own intellectual space. Okay? And the next one is transparency. Ano ibig sabihin ng transparency? Transparency in qualitative research, being able to become more open to all the possibilities. Na wala kang tinatago, wala kang, tawag dito, na parang binablock para makita kung ano yung nangyayari doon sa research mo. Although mayroon mga ilang bagay na hindi mo na kailangan i-divulge lahat. Pero what I'm trying to say is that open ka sa possibilities, open ka sa criticism, open ka for suggestions, open ka for lots of changes also. And what you're trying to present is the truthfulness, the truthfulness of your research. And the third one is methodicness. Pag sinabi mong methodicness, is like klaro sa iyo yung methodology, klaro sa iyo yung methods na gagawin mo. Alam mo kung paano paglaruan ng ang methodology at methods na gagamitin mo, mga strategies na gagamitin mo sa research. Okay? At pang-apat, yung adherence to evidence. Wala naman tayong hinahangad kundi magkaroon ng ebidensya yung mga pinapaniwalaan natin. Just for example, when I was looking at Pintakasi, alam ng komunidad na nakakatulong ito at matagal nang ginagamit. Pero bilang isang researcher, gusto mo makakahalap ng mga ebidensya na magpapatunay talaga na isang siyang proseso ng komunidad na nakakatulong sa kanila. Okay? And the last one is integrity. It's very much related also to transparency. Pero ito yung pinagsama-saba ng disiplina, andyan yung disiplina, yung truthfulness ng pinag-aaralan mo. Yung pagkakaayos ng ginagawa mo, pagkakaayos ng method mo. Na talagang pag sinabi mo integrity, yung resulta ng research mo, nagre-represent talaga ng pinag-aaralan mo. Hindi mo lang siya inimbento. Alam mo na may pinanggalingan siya na totoo doon sa ground. Hindi lang ito representation kung ano iniisip mo, pero representation ito na isang totoong karanasan na nangyari. And an example of that is Pintakasi. So my research represented the real experience of Pintakasi in the community. All right. So what are the general attributes of doing qualitative research? For example, very often yung paggawa ko ng research is individual eh. So ngayon, merong sa class, grupo kayo na gumagawa ng research. So hindi lang siya individual endeavor, pwede rin siyang sa collaborative effort. So ito yung mga kinakailangan ninyo to come up with the qualitative research. Okay? Listen. Being able to listen, napakahalaga na matuto tayong makinig. I-discuss ko ito lengthily sa isang module natin. So, pag gusto nating kumuha ng datos, so gusto natin makipag-usap sa tao, mahalaga yung napapakinggan natin kung ano yung sinasabi. Kasi minsan kapag nakikinig tayo, nagsasalita pa lang isang tao, bumubuo na tayo ng sarili, meron na tayong frames na ginagamit natin para i-frame yung sinasabi instead na talagang pinapakinggan natin yung sinasabi niya. So, sa pakikinig pa lang, kinukulayan na natin yung yung napapakinggan natin rather than really listening to the information. Okay. So listening is a very, very important element in conducting qualitative research, and even quantitative research. Listening is very, very important. The next one is asking good questions, because good question is, would describe the quality, the goodness of your research. I will talk about this later. And knowing your topic of study, so dapat alam na alam mo kung ano mo gusto mong pag-aralan, and you already have started that. So hindi lang siya parang tawag dito na naisipan mo lang na ito yung topic na gusto ko. Pag sinabing knowing your topic of study, kasama na rin yun yung aspeto ng pakikinig doon sa reality na nangyayari sa paligid mo. Anong studies ang meaningful, ang useful, and very practical sa panahon na ito? You will have to remember, kung babalikan niyo yung history ng mga popular na psychologists natin, lagi sila nagsisimula doon ng kanilang topic sa kanilang observations sa nangyayari sa paligid nila. It is always a response to a problem. It is always a response to social issues na nangyayari sa paligid. So hindi lang siya parang gusto ko ng pag-aralan ito. So gusto mong makapag-contribute sa pag-respond doon sa problema, sa pagbibigay ng solusyon sa problema. Okay? And the next one is caring about your data. Pag-aaralan natin ito sa I think sa Module 7. Kung paano mo aalagaan yung datos. Lalo na for example, sa field ka, importante na meron kang klarong strategy kung paano mo hahawakan ng husto yung datos mo na hindi siya mawawala. Just for example, nagre-recording ka, okay, tapos bigla na lang nawala yung recorder mo, di wala na yung datos mo. So, kailangan may pagpaplano kung paano mo isa-secure yung mga datos mo. Kasi pag nawala yan, wala na. For example, may journal ka na sinusulat mo lahat ng mga interviews mo, mga nangyari sa isang araw, for example, sa isang community, bigla na lang nawala. Okay? So, dapat meron kang backup lagi sa mga datos mo. Okay? For example, ang datos mo nakalagay lang sa isang computer, tapos na-corrupt yung computer mo. Di patay yung datos mo. Okay? Napakahirap magsimula ulit. Lalo, for example, ulitin mo na naman yung pag-interview sa mga tao. Okay? Persevering. Ano sabihin ng persevering? Haabot ka rin kasi sa punto na parang mapapagod ka. Okay? Hindi kasi madaling gumawa ng qualitative research. Lalo na kapag alam mo yung haba ng duration ng paggawa ay hindi ganoon kaliit. Okay? So darating ang napakaraming problema dyan. But you needed to be persevering to reach your goal. Okay? At related to the persevering is yung tolerance natin sa mataas na level na uncertainty. Ano sabihin ng uncertainty? Marami kasi mga inevitables na pwedeng mangyari. Mga situation na hindi natin gusto pero pwedeng mangyari. Just for example, when I was doing Pintakasi, dumating yung gera. So na-shake yung tawag dito, yung buong plano. Pero dapat may backup ka kung anong mga dapat gawin. So hindi mo naman parang nandoon ka sa community, nagkagera, lalayasan mo na lang mga tao. Hindi maganda yun. Parang napakabalasubas mo naman. Parang dahil nagkaroon lang ng tawag dyan, ng konting kaguluhan, yung parang, okay, fine. Kailangan mo isipin ang sarili mo. Pero, isaalang-alang mo rin yung mga binulabog mong mga tao sa paghahanap mo ng datos. So, hindi mo sila basta-basta iniiwan na lamang. Okay? So marami mga uncertainties na mangyayari kapag gumagawa ka ng qualitative research. So, kailangan handa ka sa mga backups mo. May mga plan B ka, may mga plan C ka, at marami pang iba. Later, I will be giving you examples on that. Okay? Alright, let us get into to the uh, the module 2 topic. What is research design? Okay. I'm very much aware na alam nyo na to when you were taking up your statistics, na napagdaanan nyo na ito. So, basically, when you talk about research design, is the blueprints of research. Na kumbaga, ito yung parang, alam niyo yung blueprint, di ba? Yun yung parang, usually ginagamit ito sa architecture eh. Na pag gusto mong magpagawa ng, gusto mong mag-imagine ng bahay, yung blueprint ang magbibigay sa iyo ng klarong imagination kung ano mangyayari doon sa bahay na gusto mong gawin. Similarly with research, research design gives you a glimpse, parang ano to eh, prelude sa mangyayari doon sa research mo. So it is an overall strategy in logically and coherently putting together the different elements of research. So ito yung binibigyan mo, nagbibigay ka ng parang ng introduction. Ito yung mangyayari sa research ko. Ito yung mga different elements na mangyayari na nabubuuin na magkakonektadong mga elements para mabuo ang research. So ano mga nilalaman ng qualitative research design? So fundamentally, kapag ikaw ay bubuo ng research design, ito yung mga dapat mong isaalang-alang. Ito yung parang meron ka ng hindi naman perfect, hindi naman klarong-klaro. As I've mentioned earlier, even at the start of the class, ang research design kasi sa qualitative, pwede magbago yan eh, compared sa quantitative. Kung ano yung design mo sa una, ina yan from the end. Unlike with qualitative, pwede magbago lahat yan. Even yung title mo, pwede magbago. Even yung goals mo, pwede magbago. Somewhere in the middle, even somewhere in the end. Okay? Pero kinakailangan mong tawag dito, i-record kung anong lahat ang nangyayari because that becomes the essence of the qualitative research. So let us look at the basic components of the qualitative research design. So the goal, sometimes we call it the purpose of research. And you have a conceptual framework, you have the research questions, you have the methodology and methods, and you have the validity. So kinakailangan meron ka ng, miski minsan medyo malabo pa at the start, pero medyo ka nang na-imagine kung ano mangyayari, ano magiging takbo ng research mo. So look at the goals of qualitative research. Okay. Pag gagawa tayo ng goals of qualitative research, ito yung mga ilang components na kinakailangan natin i-consider. First is to study the meaning of people's lives in the real world. So isa yun sa mga goal ng qualitative research na maintindihan natin kung ano yung nangyayari sa buhay natin, sa buhay ng tao sa real world. Okay? Mga katotohanan nangyayari doon sa ground. Okay? Later on, I will be giving you an example of that with my own research. The next one is to represent the views of the people. So, we have to be aware na nire-represent natin yung views ng mga tao, hindi yung views natin. Okay? Kaya nga tayo gumagawa ng research para maging boses tayo nung nangyayari sa ground. Okay? Ma-echo natin yung nangyayari doon. Kasi kung hindi naman, di ba, kung sarili lang naman nating interest yung i-echo natin, huwag na tayong gumawa ng research. Okay? It defeats the purpose na maging boses ng studies mo ang nangyayari sa ground. Okay? And explicitly attend to and account for real-world condition. So, kinakailangan mong mag-attend doon sa mga detalye na nangyayari doon. Kaya nga napaka-importante ng method sa methodology dahil yan ang magbibigay ng explicitness doon sa pag-account mo sa nangyayari. Okay. And the next one is to contribute insight to explain a phenomenon. So, I mean, given na yan. Parang kaya nga gumagawa ka ng research dahil gusto mong makapag-contribute sa body of knowledge eh. Pero kung parang i-replicate mo lang, okay, pwede na, okay lang, wala mo masama sa pag-replicate ng studies. Pero gusto mo pa rin as a researcher, parang isang honor na sa iyo, parang malaking accomplishment na yan na meron kang naidagdag sa pag-intindi sa mga tawag ito, sa mga nangyayari sa paligid o mga solusyon na pwede mong ma-contribute para makatugon sa mga problema natin. And the next one is acknowledging the relevance of multiple sources of evidence rather than relying on single source. So, sa goal pa lang, ina-acknowledge natin na hindi lang isa ang magiging source ng information. Napakalawak ng pwede mong pagkukunan ng mga resources. Okay? So you just simply have to be aware about that. So when we are developing our goals, so we create connection with these five what do you call this? Five basic goals. So kapag sinulat na natin yung goals natin, tingnan natin kung, of course, with our specific topics, titingnan natin kung may connect ba dito sa ilang elements na na-mention natin dito. Okay? You don't have to exactly write in the same way. Parang konektado lang siya dito sa na-mention ko. Okay? Because this is a very generic goals of qualitative research. Okay? So the next one is the research questions. Okay. When we come up with the research question, so this area of research would have to describe the goal of research. Kapag tayo ay nagpo-formulate ng mga tanong, parang ano lang yan eh, parang it's just a repetition ng goal eh. In the form of question, in the form of inquiry. So, dinidescribe niya yung goal mo sa research. And the next one is, ina-identify niya rin yung question natin, ina-identify niya yung specific method na gagawin natin. Bibigyan ko kayo ng example mamaya. Then, ito yung magiging guide natin sa plano natin. So, kapag binubuo natin yung research, hindi na tayo lalabas doon for example, we have 3 questions or 4 questions. Yung paghanap natin ng datos, hindi lalabas doon sa 4 na question na yon. Sabihin natin na gagawin natin, na pinipresent natin. Kasi kung pag walang question, kung saan pupunta yung research natin. Pero kapag meron tayong, for example, 4 na question, doon lang magpo-focus yung ating paghahanap ng datos. Okay? O even yung pag-a-analyze natin. For example, the research question will also structure our data analysis. Hindi lang siya nag-i-structure sa paghahanap ng datos, pero ito rin yung magbibigay ng direksyon o structure sa pag-analyze natin ng data. So we make sure when we get into the analysis of data na nasasagot natin o nabibigyan natin linaw yung mga tanong na tawag dito, na pinormulate natin at the start of the research. And the next one is inductively explores one phenomenon or concept. Hindi, sa research question, dinidelimit niya yung kung ano, saan topic mo gusto mag-focus. Just for example, I would like to focus on interpersonal communication during pandemic among, let's say, among families or among couples. All right? So, so binibigyan niya ng diin yung isang phenomenon. At the same time, kina-clarify niya yung mga specific variable and context. Kagaya ng example na binigay ko. So, when we are raising questions, so you make sure na tinatarget niya yung dapat nating i-target. Okay? In terms of the goal, in terms of the methods, in terms of data analysis, in terms of the phenomena we would like to observe, and in terms of the variables, and in terms of the context we would like to explore. Okay. Now, the conceptual framework. Ano ibig sabihin ng conceptual framework? what's the difference between the philosophical framework and the conceptual framework? Pag yung sa philosophical framework kasi, ito yun yung parang general, ano mo yun eh, parang yun yung personal mantra mo eh, kapag gagawa ka ng research. So, you clarify your own values sa philosophical framework. You clarify your own values, your own ethics, your own passion for doing things, your own visualization on how you see things, on how you see reality. Okay? Yun yung philosophical framework. So, yung philosophical framework, dinadala din natin yan sa buong research. Hindi lang dito sa conceptual framework. Even when we go back to our research questions, to the goals of research, nakapasok pa rin yung, you have to remember, nakapasok pa rin yung philosophical framework mo. So, more so with our conceptual framework. So, ano ibig sabihin ng conceptual framework? Okay? The conceptual framework is a synthesis of literature. It is a synthesis of literature. So kung ano man yung naging nakita natin doon sa pag-review natin ng literature, ipinapasok natin yan dito sa conceptual framework. Parang in-emphasize natin anong bahagi ng literature ang makakatulong sa pagtingin mo sa proseso ng pag-research. And the next one is connecting a theory to personal concepts. Ito yung conceptual framework, parang ano yan eh, it is almost just a blueprint kung ano yung magaganap mula sa simula hanggang sa katapusan. So ginagawa mo siya ng parang ano eh, parang alam mo yung pag nanonood ka ng movie na parang meron mo ng introduction para alam mo yun, ma-motivate ka na panoorin yung movie, for example, na showing next month. So it's the same with conceptual frameworks. It give you a very graphic representation kung ano ang magaganap doon sa research mo. In terms of the theory na makaka-impluwensya sa paggawa mo ng research, yung literature, yung mga existing literature na naka-impluwensya sa pagbuo mo ng design mo, yung mga variables na pag-aaralan mo, kung paano sila konektado sa bawat isa. Okay? At kung paano mo tatahiin o paano mo i-realize, i-implement yung mga objectives mo. Okay? And it is a model or a structure on how you want to conduct your study. Okay? Para siyang mind map. I will be giving you an example later. Okay? All right. And the next one is validity. It will be what do you call this? So before we go to research validity, prior to this is the methods, clarifying methods and methodology, and we have a separate module on that. Okay, so we go now for research validity. So it is the process of strengthening the credibility of research, and the next one is a proper interpretation of data, that it will reflect the real world that you are studying. We will have a separate elaboration on this. I think it will be in module 7. But just to have a prelude for this research validity, it is simply about, gusto mo lang siguraduhin na kung ano yung nakita mo, for example, doon sa gusto mong pag-aralan, yun talaga yung lalabas doon sa presentation mo at analysis ng data. So gusto mong siguraduhin na yung pagkaka-connect mo ng teorya, ng literature, ng datos, yung pinanggalingan ng datos at yung pag-a-analyze mo ng data ay magkakaugnay lahat. At alam mo ang dividing line between the data na nag-gather mo at yung sarili mong perception about the data. Okay? Na klaro yun. Okay? Na nagki-create ka ng klaro, ng succinct na pagkilala doon sa pinanggagalingan ng data at doon sa sa pag-represent mo sa data, and at the same time also, kung paano mo binibuo yung perception mo. Pero the question is, can we really get into 100% validity? I don't think so. Because the human factor will always set in. Kaya nga, di ba sa statistic, meron tayong tinatawag na the margin of errors. Dahil we will never have a perfect representation. We will never have a 100% perfection in terms of validation. But at least we know exactly where to draw the line, okay? In terms of our personal thoughts about it and tawag dito, an actual representation of the reality. Later on, I will be discussing about the triangulation, the aspect of triangulation, para lang ma-assure mo na hindi mo sariling kuro-kuro ang tawag dito, ang nangingibabaw sa pagtingin mo sa datos mo. Okay? Okay. So let me give you now an example of, for example, ito yung I will be sending this document to you. Yung sa, just for example, with the goals. Okay. Ito yung panahon na ginawa ko yung Pintakasi. Yung ginagawa ko yung research na Pintakasi. It was my dissertation. Medyo mahaba yan. Pero hindi ko naman in-expect na ganyang complex yung gagawin ninyo. Just have to simplify it. But I'm just trying to give you an example on how to formulate your goals. Okay? For example here, the present study has a modest goal to attempt to utilize Pintakasi in a community activity at first. So meron akong parang mga elaboration dyan kung paano magyayari yan. Okay? And later on the other hand, blah, 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 blah. Okay, let's look at the last part. So lastly, this study will try to explore the implications of the use of Pintakasi in the practice of clinical and community psychology. There are few literature that describe the role of psychologists in poor communities, much less in communities struggling in an armed conflict. Okay? So given that, I have sets of questions. You see here, I only have 3 questions. At alam nyo bang sa 3 question na yan, okay, I was able to come up with this one. It's very, very thick research. Nabawasan pa nga ito. Okay? Ganyang kakapal yung research na yan. Imagine, I did it for more than 2 years. Okay? And very rich experiences coming from those 3 questions. So pagtanong pa lang sa pagsagot pa lang ng 3 na yan, at nasa komunidad ka, napakadaming pwedeng mangyari. Okay, sa mga tanong na yan. At yung senior ko sa inyo na article, parang lalo na doon sa peace process, parang isang portion, maliit na portion pa lang yan doon sa binuo ko dito. Okay? So that's make things very exciting in qualitative research. So going back to this question, as for example, with the first question, what is the nature of Pintakasi as perceived and experienced by the people? So dito pa lang sa isang question na ito, klaro na kung ano yung parang yung metodolohiya na pag-aaralan mo. Okay? So nagbibigay ka na ng hint kung anong method, anong methodology ang gagamitin mo. Okay? At klaro din kung ano yung gusto mong pag-aralan. Gusto mong pag-aralan yung phenomenon ng Pintakasi. Yun lang. So, kagaya ng na-mention kanina, isang phenomenon ka lang mag-focus. So, nag-focus na ako dito sa Pintakasi. Okay? So, go back to what I mentioned in terms of the elements and go back also to these examples. Okay? Para makita yung clarity ng requirement at the same time, the actual example on how to do that. Right. Now, let's now go to an example of the conceptual framework. So this is so given that question and given that goal, this is the conceptual framework. So by the way, sinusulat ang conceptual framework after the related literature. Okay. All right. I will just randomly move this down. Okay. So this presents the how. Okay, let's look at the literature first. Ito yung parang pinakaano yung very influential doon na literature sa research ko. Uh, Done by Priltensky and Desenteseo and Barrow. Okay. So, and Freire also. Because these are psychologists who took ground. They're very socialist. They're very socially moved in terms of doing research. They're very much grounded with the struggles of the poor people. Okay? So, dyan pa lang, makikita mo sa conceptual framework ko kung alam mo na kung sino ang mag-i-influensya sa akin sa pagbuo ng research na ito. Okay? And at the same time also, it captures the different methodology and methods that I will be using. And even my philosophical framework, although not directly, parang hindi siya, parang embedded na lang siya, na hindi mo siya explicitly makikita, pero makikita mo kung saan yung direksyon ng pananaw ko sa paggawa ng research. Okay. By the way, nakalimutan ko, dahil, for example, nasa group kayo, di ba? Not necessarily within our class. Na for example, 5 kayong gagawa ng research, qualitative research. Importante na klaro yung philosophical framework nyo. Kasi baka mamaya parang ikaw lang yung parang gustong bumabad, for example, sa mga mahihirap. And the rest parang gusto lang nilang gumawa talaga ng research. So, kapag gano'n na magkakahiwala yung pananaw at hindi walang meeting point sa direksyon ng pagtingin sa research, sisiguraduhin ko sa iyo magkakaroon kayo ng malaking conflict at hindi nyo ma-achieve ang dapat ninyong ma-achieve in terms of really getting into the soul of research. Okay? So, ang paalala ko lang is kung 5 kayong gumagawa ng research, klaro sa inyo, i-settle nyo kung ano ba talaga yung goal ninyo, ano yung philosophical framework nyo. So you have to, to lay down the card and really clarify your expectations in terms of your understanding about research. So going back to the framework, to the conceptual framework. So aside from the descriptive write-up here, so meron rin akong ginawang parang mind map kung paano mangyayari. Just for example, with the Pintakasi, meron na kasing traditional Pintakasi na ginagamit nila sa pagpa-farming, okay, so on and so forth. On the other hand, also, hindi pa kasi natatry ang Pintakasi sa ibang pangailangan. So, yun yung challenge. So, yun yung framework ko. Gusto kong makita kung mag-work ba ang Pintakasi kapag inilabas mo siya sa traditional na paggamit nito. Okay? So, ginamit ko siya sa panahon ng gera, ginamit ko siya sa peace process. At yun yung in-explore ko. And another thing, with the traditional Pintakasi, wala siyang planning, wala siyang evaluation. At ito yung dinagdag na component, yung idinagdag ko na component sa Pintakasi, yung pagpaplano, kung paano mag-implement ng program at kung paano mag-evaluate ng program. Okay? So ito yung proseso ng pag-revise ng Pintakasi. Okay? Ito yung konsepto. At ito yung nagbibigay ng madali ang pananaw kung saan ko gustong dalhin yung paggawa ko ng research at saka yung pagtingin ko dun sa phenomenon na tinatawag ng Pintakasi. Okay? So I will be sending this sample to you. At hindi rin naman kinakailangan mag-focus kayo dito. Marami pang mga samples na makikita kayo in the internet and in your reading, in your personal readings also. I'm just trying to give you an idea on how it works, on how you do it. Okay? All right. All right. So going back, again, I will be sending you that document so that you will have an idea on how to formulate your questions, how you write your questions, how you write your goals, at the same time how you write your conceptual framework. Okay? All right. So in the same manner, so this is the main reference that I used. And lastly, to end this module 2, I would like you to answer the form related to module 2. And another assignment is to start developing a research design. Okay? Again, as I mentioned earlier, hindi naman kinakailangan klaro na agad from the very start kung ano yung design niya. At least you have a very rough idea kung ano ang mangyayari. But later on, you can still improve it, and much more kapag nandoon na kayo sa field sa pagkuha ng datos. Marami pang pwedeng magbago. But tentatively, as a working research design, I would like you to come up with your own, start developing your own research design. Okay? So that's all for now. Thank you so much for listening. Wellness to all.